So for the third episode of this podcast, I have for a guest Nathan Spearing. And jokes aside, you are what I would refer to as like my Ranger grandfather. So welcome to the Redacted Culture Cast. Nathan, what can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I am a husband, father of 5, so married, 5 children. I have for almost 6 years. This December will be 6 years paroled from U.S. military, as I say sometimes to the clerk that says, "Do you get a veteran or a military discount?" I'm like, well, if paroled veterans get it. So left active duty service in 2016 after almost 14 years of special operations service. 1st Ranger Battalion, 3rd Ranger Battalion, and then the last 6 years-ish, almost 7 years at Fort Bragg. And then still live in North Carolina with my family. And so, yeah, I don't know how in-depth of the bio, but essentially 12 deployments, kind of my last couple deployments was starting to see the writing on the wall that the effectiveness overseas, the way I gauged effectiveness, wasn't worth the time not spent with my family. And so decided that I wanted to try my hand at something else. And aside from knowing I was going to be present more, wasn't really planned out. So had a great tour of service, had a great, super grateful for the experiences, would do it. Starting back at age 19, would do it again every single time because it laid the foundation for who I am, but also can't put into words how glad I am to not be a part of it anymore. Mostly because I've experienced the quiet life and all the good things that go with that. And so I guess that's where I'm at now. That's why I'm on this podcast now. We connected in kind of my side hustle, if you will, of podcasting, blogging, writing about my personal journey from special operations, all that went into becoming what, a lot of people fantasize about, and then kind of walking away from it for something bigger, something that lasts longer than a DoD pension, and then meaning it when I say I'm living the dream 100%. And I think have a heart for guys in transition, have a heart for guys that gave their all to things and then find themselves doing something they feel like they suck at. I was there. I did it. There is hope. You can set an azimuth to a spot. And so, yeah, I'm doing conversations with people on my own podcast, Life on Target podcast, and just really enjoying conversations like this one where we get to talk about things out of a experience that a lot of people haven't had, but also stuff that's very applicable for every person, no matter where they find themselves. And I think, people can say, "Oh, I'm not a pro athlete. Oh, I didn't do special operations service. I'm just a banker. I'm just a mom. I'm just a whatever." Say, we don't, in the billions of things happening every second and them all being spun by a higher power, we don't really know the significance of what our actions are, however small they may seem. And I think those of us that have served in some of these additional capacities understand how small things can spin and ripple in good and bad ways. So that's where I am now is trying to be faithful in the small things. I think it's easy to be good at the big things. It's easy to not let the big things drop, but all the little things that make up being an exceptional human being is hard to nail all the little things back to back to back to back. So, and neglect how much those little things add up to big things. So anyway.
Interesting. Well, before I get into anything else, as for those of you who are listening, this podcast is actually brought to you by you. So if you want to support the channel, you guys can head to redactedllc.com. That's where we sell our merch. But that's all you're going to get for ads today. So Nathan, I wanted to start there. One of the things that, okay, you said it's being good at the little things, right? And so when we're talking about, like, I can remember even as a kid sort of idolizing this idea of being a commando, a ranger, or whatever, or even as a young man, this idea of like of sort of coming into being, coming into achievement, as if like, well, if I get my ranger tab, then I'll be good. I don't need to worry about the little things anymore because I've got the big questions figured out. I don't need to worry about my drinking problem because I'm a Christian. I don't need to worry about whatever, you know, you could bring up all these subjects. And it's interesting that you say, you know, like, I think many of us have come from the perspective of saying, well, if I'm good at the little things, then bigger things will be given to me. But it's like, when you what is the little things that you're talking about? What is it like? And then how do you deliberately show, how do you like measure success, and how do you push yourself in that direction? Give me an example.
Yeah, I guess one of the quantifiable ways that you can measure little things is, if, you know, I couldn't quote the numbers offhand, but essentially if you're started investing $1,000 a year, you know, or $1,000 a month or whatever at 18 to 25, or you're a guy that starts in his 40s and goes till 65, and looking at the effects of compound interest over time. And essentially, the earlier that you invest that same amount of money, the more the overall yield or rate of return is, because you started earlier. And then
Dave
you and
Ramsey
I both
monetary
understand
theory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you and I both understand from a land nav perspective, if you're trying to do an 800 meter, you know, relatively short leg on a land nav course, and you're forget to do declination on your compass, you know, forget to calculate the 2 degrees or the 4 degrees or whatever appropriately. You know, for listeners that aren't, I mean, I imagine most of your listeners would understand magnetic declination on a compass, but essentially the difference between magnetic grid and true grid on the map. So you're only going 800 meters. If you're 2 to 3 degrees off an 800 meter leg, you might still get to your destination, and be fine, or be close enough to where when you kind of know your pace count and you've walked 800 meters and you look around, you're like, I see it over there. You know, terrain feature. I'm going to walk uphill from here because it's at the top of the hill. So, you know, the little things is, you know, everything that is involved in plotting a grid coordinate and getting to that destination. You know where you are, you know where you're going. You have to take the coordinate and put it on the map appropriately. You have to use your protractor. You have to appropriately put the dot where it goes. You got to make sure the dot's not very big, because the map, a big dot on a little map can be 200 meters wide, 300 meters wide, and you don't want to, you know. So I think that's how I think about it is.
Cool. I got video again. So the question that I was asking was like, the question I want to ask you personally is like, so you went through this experience where you got to see the holes in your net, the holes in your life. And it's like, you know, us coming from different areas, similar areas, like all of us know the E7 who's on his 4th wife, right? Like the stereotype of the guy who's been in the military for a long time and like marriages never work out because he's never home, the private military contractor who's never home. And so like, his relationships come and go and they abuse him and he abuses, whatever, right? So like there's the stereotype of that guy, but you're by no means that person. Like you're actually in the spectrum. Like you and I think had a similar experience when it came to one. I think we actually, like, where did you get the word "the spearing"? Where did you get that nickname?
Well, I don't know that came out of the military. I think that that was trying to find something that was available on
That was
all
yours.
social handles.
Okay.
And making the formatting stuff. But yeah, I think that it's easy for a man to compare, and that's essentially what I had that conversation with Aaron Wren recently, where he talks about guys want to win social status competitions with each other, and in a sense the hierarchy or the world is set up such that that women are watching men and they're judging them, in a lot of the primitive primal ways that we see in the animal kingdom too. Like, are you going to be able to defend my future young? Are you going to be able to provide for me? And even I would say that our young people aren't instructed on really how to order their affections in responsible ways. And that is probably why the E7 with his fourth wife is where he is he does not understand. He's bought a lie that true satisfaction is about upgrades. Like I guess in some ways we can't confuse an upgrade with us getting better at things. An upgrade, and you get caught into this cycle of, I got to get the nicer car, an upgrade, or I got to get in better shape. I made myself better, and so I think at that human, Bonson's book, There's No Free Lunch, however many 100 principles on economics or whatever, essentially human flourishing for a man knows whether or not he achieved it or not of his own doing, or whether it was given to him, and so to make a man miserable is to just give him everything. He doesn't have to contend against any risk. He doesn't have to overcome physical or mental difficulties. And at the end of the day, he hits this bed and he knows he didn't create anything. He didn't overcome anything. And in a society where we're so comfortable, a lot of guys, I think, there was a conversation I had with Will Spencer, the Renaissance of Man, is his movement, and he was saying that one of the biggest problems facing men is self-loathing disguised as addiction, and essentially all these kind of alcoholism, promiscuity, financial ruin, all these different things that are symptoms at the core of a man being still a boy, still insecure about where he sits in the hierarchy. And in a sense, you see this on Instagram as people trying to hack their way to the top. And they spend all this time doing the hacks. It's like the con man that tries to get the 50% down payment and then never show up again. And he knows there's an unlimited number of suckers out there. Or where I am, or say, I'd like to get every single remodel that you ever want to do on your house forever. And all your friends that ever talk at a social gathering about remodeling their house. Literally right before we got on this call I was talking to a gal on the phone that said, I know this gal, I know this gal, I know this gal. They all told me to call you, and I didn't really know. I don't think any of them that she mentioned, I couldn't think of their names. I heard one of the names before, and then like 3 or 4 other people were referring me that I don't even know who they are. And that is first of all, it's grace of God, because my operation still needs a lot of work. But second is ultimately being honest and doing good work. And and realizing in some sense, and this is from the business side, but the lifetime value of a customer, they say in business, that it's not just that interaction with that person, but it's what value that person's social network has for you as well. And this isn't trying to be transactional about relationship, but just the reality that in human experience, when we interact with people, when we do things professionally, when we do things personally, when we're in relationship with people, that it has an opportunity. There's an opportunity there to bless and encourage people in what they're doing, or to tear them down. And I guess one really specific example, I just recently shared this on a podcast, but I was involved in church. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm listening. My computer's making a noise, but it's just go ahead. I'm listening.
I was in faithful church attendee for the majority of my military career, but I found myself going to church on Sunday mornings and looking around at the guys that are there, the fathers, the grandfathers, the single men, whatever, and judging them on a physical scale, and
Yep.
For the most part, every single one of them, if they didn't serve with me, was a little pudgier. I knew I could right now run a mile faster than all of them, or whatever. And it allowed me, and my wife called me out on it. And this is the beauty of not saying, "You're crazy, woman. I need to get another one because you're telling me these things that I don't like to hear." She said, "Do you think you could learn how to be a better father from this particular guy? Do you think that this guy maybe is more patient than you? Do you think this," and essentially highlighting, the soul and the spirit of another guy. I'm judging on the body, the physical body, these different traits, because that's something I'm inherently good at. And I'm missing the spirit aspect of a guy that allows him to regulate his emotions when he's talking to his kids better than I do. And the reality of in the Christian tradition, the church being one body, that metaphor of kind of things. And I've said I would, for the majority of my life, for sure, I'm the right knuckle of the church. Like I'm making impact with the target. I'm the warrior. I'm the gun guy. I'm the and it's very easy for the right knuckle to discount what the shoulder's doing in this situation.
Your place, like you've at least kind of figured out where you fit in the body, in the ecosystem, but you have also inflated that with disdain for the other parts.
Yes. And
I think there's definitely a balance to be reached, because like there's it's like there's been times where you meet people who are call them they call themselves Christians or whatever. It's like or whatever they believe in, and for us it's like the extent of your faith would evaporate just at the sight of a curled fist. Like we've all met these people. We know, what I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, we're there. You can go if you want to go and find people, you can, especially in whether it's in churches, in the Christian circles, or like in this country, who the depth of their conviction would evaporate with any conflict, any challenge, any right, like and like those people, like you can, that's not those people, like you can observe that, right? And then, but at the same time, that's not the same thing as saying. So what you're making the argument for is that, like, though those people exist, that is not the same. Being able to make that observation is not the same thing as recognizing that some people have what people bring to the table, what they have to offer, what you have to learn from them is not always the same thing. I think of how people have described human beings and like skill sets, and like I was raised in the 90s. The primary, there's no surprise whatsoever why video games are all like, so many video games are like class-based where you have your mage and your wizard and your knight and your whatever, because in the 90s, some people were smart and some people were strong and some people were, crafty, but at the end of the day, they all had something to play. They all had a part to play. And how, like, it, and in the constraints of a video game, that makes sense. Because that's how a video game is structured. But that's like, are you saying that's what real life is like, where some people, everyone has something to offer? Are you saying that everyone has something to offer, or like, how did you? I don't know. We're not on the main.
If the you can also extend metaphors far past what they're useful for, but I would say in that somebody that will compromise their principles or will vanish at the sight of a certain situation, I would say is there's maybe two ways to look at that. One would be, is the rib cage of the church cracking underneath what a right knuckle should be doing? Are they in this position because the right knuckle didn't do what he was supposed to do? And they're just never going to be the right knuckle. Or are they supposed to be doing what the rib is doing, and they're saying, "Oh no, I want to be out of the body now. I want to sell the church out." And Anthony Esselin has a really good article from 2013, 2016. I had just interviewed him recently, and he's got some just amazing works that I think you'd really, I don't know if you've read No Apologies yet, but it's, why civilizations depend on the strength of men. And he's essentially starts it out by saying grown men are strong enough in their identity to roll their eyes when a feminist says something, antagonistic about men. They're strong, they're men. They grow up, they know they're but boys don't know that. Boys are being made into men. And that's why I wrote this book, is because I shouldn't have to say these things, and men know, like real men know the deal, and it's not harming them, but the future generation of boys don't know, and they're being told something about who they are that's not true, and it's for them. And he has this article about what will you do when the persecution comes, is the article. And he breaks down the church into 3 or 4 different things. And it's, ones that are in the church for status, and ones that just hate the church and like to just be in there and punish people. And then there's soldiers, and there's, it was a pretty good breakdown of kind of where everybody is. And I think that, even just going through the last couple years, and we've seen what they call, the church will call persecution, is in some ways laughable. And then in my own congregation, seeing people like you and I have been in situations that required us to act on belief that God is in control of the ultimate day when we leave this life, And so I can't affect where, in the battlefield, I don't know whether there's a machine gun position in, this particular compound on the door ready for me to, or they cut a hole out in the side of the wall so that when you walk by and they get the drop on you. I don't necessarily, I can't see every angle when I'm walking down the street. I have a sector, I'm watching that. We're trying to kind of, as an organization, do that. So you could decision fatigue.
Your severe lack of omniscience is made very, very clear to you when you're looking through the 40 degrees of night vision tubes, and you know that's like, well, I can't see everything, but I still have to act. Like I don't know what's in the room, but I have to go into the room.
Exactly, right? And like you said, is you go through, we're talking about CQB at one point. Like if you stop and hesitate, and the speed, security, and violence of action. And if you don't have security, then violence of action and speed makes up for it, and And so some ways you can look at another guy in the church and be like, bro, like you should have had that, man, or you should have been strong enough to understand the PSYOP campaign that major media is running on us right now, and know the difference. And in my mind, there's an inner circle too. So you can appreciate the larger church population, and you can identify certain people that you're going to hang out with that are going to make you better because they're better than you. Or you can identify certain people that you can hang out with that you legitimately see where they are in life and you think that you can help them. Like I want you to, the way I describe it in business, I know for a fact that if I take a guy that has the drive that I have, but not the experience, I can get him in business where I am now after almost 6 years of business. I can get him there in 18 months for sure. If he's going to believe what I say and he's going to, he's got the drive. Because I say, trust me, this sucks. Don't do it this way. Start with this contract. And I actually know my brother, same industry as me, passed me up, in a year and a half, 2 years. And I handed him everything. Like, here's the contract I'm working on. Here's my script that I use for this type of a client that's, this challenge or this way of dealing with what, they're saying they disagree with you on or whatever. We kind of walk through it. Not a whole lot. He was like, cool. And he's just executed and is crushing it. And the same thing. So you can look at a guy in the church and be like, hey, bro, I'm seeing your kids are driving you crazy. You got to discipline them at the house. You gotta deal with this 18-month-old all the time at the house, at dinner, at bedtime, so that they can sit in church quietly, or so that you can go to the grocery store or out to eat and they'll behave themselves. Or you can hang out with 4 or 5 people that are just suck at life, like just a little bit less than you. And you can be the guy that's the pack leader in a sense. And you can kind of talk down to all those guys and just stay right where you're at, and so I think that's common for man to do. Is I'm going to cultivate a group of 5 guys that all look at me like I'm the guy, I'm the man, or I'm just a little bit better than them, and I can lay down at night and be like, oh yeah, I showed them, I did this, and you're never going to become who you could really become if you weren't challenged by somebody better.
So let's take that scenario. Actually, I think it's a really good place to come. So one thing that, the thing that spurred on and kind of produced this whole culture cast is one of the things we're seeing changing in the time that we live is we're seeing a generational shift when it comes to gun culture. The firearms industry is kind of passing away, and it's being replaced by gun culture. And gun culture is much broader than possession, right? So, you can make the joke like, 2 world wars, 1911, you can make the joke. You can dig into the joke, but like the older ways were, seem to be a lot more focused on like, the Second Amendment is my right to bear arms, right? And like, we can make a joke about it, but like the newer generation and gun culture is much broader of a subject, whether it's demographically, but we don't want to get into that. But it's like, suddenly homesteading is now part of gun culture, right? And so another and something that gets brought up, I think I hear from the community, is like, we need to build culture. How do you do that? We need to build a community. We need to have I need to have my tribe. This is masculinity. This is gun culture. This is Americanism. This is whatever you want to call it. Like 2022 Americana is lonely young men with nothing to aim at and no belief that they can achieve it. And that's terrifying. And I have been there. So you make this observation, you say, okay, you started to build your posse, your gang, but you realize that you've built your gang out of people that allow you to be complacent. How do you how do you change that? Do you replace them? Do you go back to the cranky wife, get a new model version, or like how do you make that assessment, and how do you do that with humility, where you look at yourself and you say, this guy is not my friend, I'm keeping him around as a cheerleader. How do you like deal with that in a way? It's so broad. That's how do you check yourself for creating that scenario? What have you done? What have you seen in yourself where like sometimes it happens and you get to do it and you're like, oh wow, I actually don't admire this person and I don't care about our friendship. I really just keep him around because he makes me feel good. Eesh. I need professors, not cheerleaders. I need people who are going to tell me when I am wrong, and then I'm going to believe them and then follow through with it. I don't need people who tell me I'm a good person. So like, same thing with a pastor. I don't need a pastor who's like, oh, okay, don't beat your wife. It's like, okay. Yeah. Like,
well, and you inherently, we're immortal beings. There is something otherworldly about the human species. I think that a pretty broad audience could agree with that. So then you walk that out. Why does it not matter? No matter what culture you find yourself in, for the vast majority of human experience, is murder wrong? And can we inherently know the difference between I don't like you, so I'm just going to kill you, or you raped someone and now you're getting the death penalty or whatever? Like, I know that's a lot of ways to come at those issues, and people will fall all over the map with that. But to just say is that there's this belief or there's this kind of set of rules that just exists, and is not is not cultural, like so much as it is. I think we see that with the assault on sexuality in general, and the trying to blur the lines, and you see these African tribes that are just like, like completely oblivious that type of political assault is happening at on the sexuality level. So I would say
while the West kind of engages in madness, the world laughs. It's just it is what it is, right? Like, and
the contrast between the U.S. Army's recruiting video and Russia's recruiting video that hit the blogosphere, Twitter sphere, like a while back, that was largely celebrating social experiments over, like, the Russian video is just like this dude push-ups, jumping over the wall, being strong, which is actually what is required to win wars, etc. But I'd say that the way that I kind of lay out my life is time being the only resource that you should really ever care about. And I say that to guys that are in the military that are like, oh, I really wanted to get sergeant major, so I'm gonna, and I got to do, that's where my peer group is. My peer group, this coming February would be my 20-year mark. And so guys that are,
you get your,
my $3,300 a month for perpetuity while I'm alive. But as soon as I die, that's done, and even just this today, back and forth. I was sharing, a post I did a while back on Instagram that was like, $3,300 a month as a retired E9, or $4,800 in 1 week on one Airbnb that I remodeled in 3 years after I got out of the military. So I'm getting, my federal retirement every weekend now on one of my properties. And I used the time, the excess time that I had to remodel this house. And now it is something that is going to make as long as my family owns that, it's going to make us money for the most part. There's going to be ups and downs, and do we have to have cash reserves to be able to take the downturn in short-term rental market, and what's going to happen with inflation, blah, 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 whatever. That's just one lever, or that's just one, variable in what I think is the buzzword in our circles is productive household. Which is a broader umbrella than productive property or one of these kind of more narrow definitions. But I would say is as a man who seeks to build a productive household, which a productive household essentially is when you take me, my wife, and my kids, and you look at every activity we're involved in, and you look at how we spend our time, where we're earning money, what products my companies or services my companies are rendering to the general public, and you kind of rack and stack all that. My household is a net producer. We are adding to society when you do this, and we're far and above what we consume, And so I would say that maybe there's an infinite scale of productivity that is essentially there, and the productivity is, when you say productive property, it's maybe a monetary kind of thing, but a productive household can also be inviting people over for dinner and having them sit around your kitchen table, and then their kids. I mean, we live in a bus underneath a pole barn on 54 acres with chickens, with a garden, with, we have a well, we have septic, we're essentially, we got power from the grid. When we moved out there for the first 5 weeks, we didn't, which was a fun experiment to see, what do we actually need to live, and was something to do. But I have this pole barn, I'm living in a bus, but I can have 25 people out, and we can serve them food that actually costs more money when you buy better food, or we can serve them like the best food because it is no chemicals. We grew it on our land from a seed, so it's actually incredibly cheap from a productivity standpoint, or chickens that we grew on our land and butchered that are, depending on what the market's doing, more expensive than steak is because of, the commoditization of food. So I can actually, my sons and daughters and myself can grow a chicken and butcher it and put it on a table that tastes different than one that's been injected with steroids and triple chlorine washed and, has 60% of them have pathogens on them, and you can take a bite of it, and there's something at a meta narrative level that's different about that experience.
Yeah, like my brother-in-law, they grow their own chickens, and when you eat them, you become full faster.
Yes,
like you just taste that. There is something different. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, and I think that.
So you were saying.
So a lot of the issues that we have these days are because we don't sit around good food together as humans. And so, Abe Lincoln said, I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better, or, George MacDonald said, each human being, paraphrasing, lifts up a different aspect of the creator in what they do, and in some ways, I kind of feel like whether you're a Christian or not, there's something about your humanity that's unique to you, certifiable via genetics, via all this. There's only ever really been somebody that's you, and you take your experiences, you take all these things. It makes a very unique work of art, if you want to take it that far. And so you're going to say, all right, we're going to cultivate art, good meal being art. We're going to, there's a barn that my sons and I, with my construction crew, built together. We work this land. There's this full spectrum human experience. And kind of the culmination of that is gathering around the table with people that we invite over. Now, sometimes we invite people over that we just like, okay, life is a mess right now. The barn pad's a mess. And we just really can't have anybody over right now because we don't want them to see how we live, sometimes. And so there's you can have your in-laws over and your sister-in-law and brother-in-law because they're family and they know a long time ago how crazy you are, And then there's people that you can have that are your inner circle. And then there's specific types where you're like, we really want to get this right for the event, not because we're trying to be fake, but we want to serve the people coming. We want the meta narrative to be more dialed in. We want them to not have to worry about things being dirty. We want them to be able to be comfortable. We want them to, it's an experience that we're trying to cultivate out of our home for the benefit of people. And so I think that, as I guess getting back to, I slice thing with is time. And so I deliberately seek out mentors. So, my advice would be to any man, if you're not, I would say at least maybe biweekly, at the frequent, at least as frequent as once a month, meeting with a man that has some aspect of his life that you want. And you call him up, you say, Mr. So-and-so, I want to meet with you. And I really would like to ask you about how, whatever. Can we meet? I'm buying lunch, whatever. And you do that. And it doesn't even have to be the same guy because you don't necessarily, depending on, and also to not set your sights so high. All of us think like, I need to be in the room with this guy. I deserve a seat at the table.
Warren Buffett or some
literally
wealthy guy. Yeah. Okay.
There is a guy in your church that has financial advice that is 2 or 3 rungs above what you possess. And you couldn't even ask Warren Buffett the right question to get the value. And so I think that there's one of the ways that the times I botched this is getting out of the military. Like they say the 7 degrees of separation, for those of us that served in special operations capacity, I think that's about 1 to 2 now for everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Just because you're that much closer to, you have a number of a guy that's a general and he works for the president now, or whatever. And so the hop, the first 3 or 4 hops to get into the kind of these linchpin type people is gone. It's 1 hop to a linchpin type guy. And one of the things that I think is hard for guys to realize is like, you're not even ready to be at that table yet. You haven't done the miles as a businessman to really be able to understand what this guy could teach you. And if you get in the room with him, you'll show yourself to be a fool, probably. Obviously, if you're coming in humility or whatever, but you're not maybe going to get another time at the table with him. And so I have for sure locally two mentors, and then 2 guys that pretty much know all the nitty gritty about me that I can call and talk. One of my friends calls it the sanity committee. Like, cool. Hey, my past. I dealt with this. This is what I'm dealing with, bro. And in some ways, you're able to do that because you're secure who you are before the Creator, and you realize that God sees a man's ways and knows already. So it's like, all right, God's already seen it all, whatever. And so, you allocate time to meet with those guys, and no matter what happens, no matter what you talk about, it's fruitful in your life. And then it's up to you to go and apply it, in a day-to-day level. Then you also have time that's set aside. It's like, we're going to just try to cultivate the gathering where we facilitate that happening. we're going to invite these people. Well, for example, we're doing Feast of Tabernacles camp out at our land. And it's kind of an open invite thing to our church and some of the sister churches and local people. And it's like, hey, come out. My wife and I, or my wife mostly and my daughters, we're going to have probably 4 or 5 pots of chili, cornbread, these things. Some people are going to bring sides. So you're going to have dinner. There's going to be a bonfire and you can camp. And, so last year was first annual. This is, second annual is coming up. And there's 100 people camping last year. I don't know what the number will be this year. We got about 100 RSVP'd, but we allowed for like a dinner and fire type thing for young families that don't want to camp. And then there's campers. So probably,
is this legal? Is this legal?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Right. I could imagine the headlines, right? So like what is it? They accused Douglas Wilson of trying to turn, what is it?
Moscow into like a Christian town.
A Christian town. It's like, well, I mean, like you could be a lot worse. There's a lot worse out there, right? But
yeah. It was like funny too, because last year we put a sign because there was nothing really at the road. And we didn't have an address assigned because we had just closed the land like a month earlier. So it's like, hey, go down the street. There's a sign, and we put the pin in the Evite, and then some of our neighbors like drove down. They're like, is this? And then like a lot of neighbors thought that was a church getting built there because it was Feast of Tabernacles camp out. So they're like, they're putting a church back there, what the heck, and yeah. Redneck drive back. Hey, what's going on? And
better be Southern
and we
Baptist.
say, hey, come on, want some chili? Let's go. And then there's just kids. And was really cool was, that was I think a Friday night. Sunday morning, all the kids are coming up to me and they're saying, when are we doing it again? Because they just had the coolest camp out experience. They're running around with all their friends till 2 a.m. in the woods, trying to find kids, whatever. And so there's this multi-generational, there's this, I guess concentric circles, like inner circle, outer circle, but like most people, I don't think, and this isn't something that's magic either. It's literally like, we got 2 porta johns delivered, it's like stick them up by the woods. Cause people don't want, people do mess all over our pasture or whatever for weeks to come. We can't. So put 2 porta johns over there, made some chili. Come on, let's camp out. Bonfire, singing, hanging out. And, and then a bunch of people go to sleep. 2 or 3 people are sitting around the fire. And it's not magic. You just say, hey, everybody, we're going to meet. And you don't even have to own land like I do. You just say, we're going to meet at this park. We're going to do this. And I think that people overcomplicate relationship and then just don't do anything. And I've done some Warriors Tending Gardens socials, and it's like, send the email out. I'll be at this brewery. We're going to talk about man stuff. And 98 guys show up, day after Thanksgiving. And they're like, what are we doing? And how did you do this? And I was like, I wasn't really sure anybody was going to show up, but whenever you take the risk and say, I'm going to be here, we're going to talk about this, any or all of you, and you're okay with one person showing up and just having a conversation with whoever that one person that shows up is, or
everyone wants to be the guy who says, here I am, send me, but very few of us actually like it. I want to dig into this a little bit. You were talking about mentors a minute ago. Can you substitute mentors with like a series of podcasts that you like Jordan Peterson, or like can you substitute the relationship of a mentor with somebody you don't know but you listen to, like a book, a series of books, a series of can you, or is the answer no? Like
I would say that the 60% of a mentor can be satisfied with YouTube. And
60%. Okay.
I would say 60%, maybe 50. I don't know. That's just kind of a gut. And I can't remember where my wife and I have talked about this. I've talked about there's I think it's a tragedy that you can get that much from YouTube, because you can get 60%, because you can get 70%, you never seek out that 40 to 30% of mentorship that you are missing from an in the flesh mentor that knows you.
But in the end, it's an all or nothing thing, right? Like, who cares if you're 60%? Like, you can't be. Was it DJ Shipley who says, like, I could be a 60% when he was in the teams, you know, like, good. Like, he's like, I could be a 60% husband, but I couldn't be a 60% SEAL, right? Like, because if I was a 60% SEAL, you know, Navy SEAL, it'd get people killed. But if I was a 60% husband, no one died. Like. So I mean, it is in regards to mentorship. Is that the case? Is that what you're arguing? Is that, like, it doesn't matter whether you get 60% from YouTube? That missing 40% is still vital. It is not more. It's. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I guess when you say from, you know, say I could be a 60% husband and nobody died. Yeah, maybe nobody died, but maybe your children's view of who God is irreparably marred because they thought that their heavenly Father was like their 60% dad. And so they'll never be able to reconcile where they sit with their Creator because of you. And what are the generational effects of that marred relationship because you didn't image the Heavenly Father faithfully to your kids? You can't even really, and I would say that sounds exactly like a special operations guy that told his family to wait because he thought 60% is not good enough. Like, reality is a 60% SEAL at that level is probably almost always good enough in some ways. We want to make it no fail. And even when I was going through, you know, the most difficult training course that I went through I had to go through it twice. And the first time I was 23 and I was like, I'm going to do anything in my power to pass this thing, you know, like, short of sell my soul to the devil. I'm doing it. I'm going to stay late. I'm going to run the obstacle course every weekend. I'm going to shoot for 4 hours on open range. I'm going to get these technical skills. And I failed because I couldn't. I wasn't mentally tough enough to overcome my bad shot in room 1 of the shoot house. And so what essentially that boiled down to is I was 23 and my gray matter wasn't mature enough to understand life experiences, the breadth of life experiences, and to fail and to realize, oh, screw that up. You know, like some of the 30-something-year-olds would be like, shoot, I nailed that hostage, you know, and whoops, you know, and then continue to execute. And as a 23-year-old, I was like, oh my gosh, I've had 4 bad shots this morning already. You know, I'm like, and I'm just running the tape on myself and I'm just crushing myself mentally and I'm not able to be there. So, I mean, I guess, you know, bring that back to the mentor side of it is, I guess I would say if you're making the excuse that it's good enough and you're trying to tell yourself it's good enough over and over and over again, you're hitting the pillow and you're running that thing. Well, at least nobody's going to die. I sucked at this. Why is that continuing to come back from your subconscious into your conscious? Like, is something telling you need to do this better instead of continuing to run that same excuse play against it? And I would say that, you know, yes, you can get the 60-70% mentorship, but at the same time, are you okay with being a 60-70% human? You know, because the only way you realize your full potential as a human being is to seek out the 100% solutions and add those to your current capacity. So, you know, you may only be a 60% dad. Maybe you can't, I mean, and that's, I guess, the tension that I had when I was in the military was, I have duty to country. I have, Uncle Sam, I'm on the calling card for Uncle Sam for these, these things. And there's 2 or 3 times in my career that I told Uncle Sam no. Said, hey, you got to go. We need you in here. And I said, I don't think I'm on call right now. Yeah, but we gotta, it's the spin, and I was like, my wife just had our 4th kid. I've been remodeling this house between TDY, making 2 house payments for the last year. And, get somebody else. And not all in one phone call. It was kind of like, oh shoot. Okay. I gotta talk to my wife about this. Let me see, and then kind of going and lobbing, hey, I think I might have to go do this trip for America, and just like waiting to dodge the dishes that she throws at me. And did she throw 2 dishes? If she didn't throw 2 dishes, then I probably should just go. And in some ways, the way that I say that is, that's not leadership. Yeah. If you're going to your wife and seeing how pissed is she going to be at me for doing this, okay, she didn't hit the threshold that I feel like I've set hypothetically in my mind of pissed. So, but really what you're doing is you're wanting her to lead, and you're waiting to see what her reaction is instead of doing the right thing. So I kind of did that, but then I also called 2 or 3 Christian guys that understood where I was, understood they were there too. And I said, what do I do? And they're like, dude, I think that you tell them this is one of those times where they just didn't plan well enough, and you tell your boss, and I get to say that because I didn't suck at everything else. I didn't, I wasn't terrible at my job. I was actually pretty good at it. And so when a lesser man would maybe get fired immediately, it's like, all right, that's it, man. 5 times you've screwed this up. You told us no here. You did these other things. You're out. You got, and that's, I guess, one of the reasons why you want to be excellent at everything you do to the best of your ability, is because you don't know when you're going to have to do that, I guess. I'm going to pause because I don't see you, and I imagine it's still recording here.
As Nathan was saying in the second pre-show, the conversation was going so well that the powers that be had to crush us and oppress us out of communication. In reality, the internet went out for the entire city that I live in for a number of hours, so we had to cut the conversation short yesterday, which gives us an opportunity to kind of review that. But going into it now, we've been talking about a large number of things. What I'm trying to get from what I've admired about you, what I've learned from you, Nathan, is that you talk about these concepts. One of them being profitable property, maybe a form of independence, and like these are terms that we like to use, but you have tried and shown ways to make it happen. Your family lives in a bus that's in a barn that's on 60 acres, and that. What can you say? Like, what is it when let's say you're somebody, you've gotten out of the military, or you've graduated from college, but you're sitting in a position where you don't have a lot of money saved up. You're recognizing your naivety towards the world, but you're trying to learn it and overcome it, and you don't know how to get started, and you don't know how to set that mindset, and you don't have a mentor in place, and you look at yourself and you go, wow, I am in a I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm dependent on the economy being safe and easy, that no one's going to, like, when you recognize your fragility, how did you go from being a tier 1 operator in its truest definition to being, a father, a business owner, and a gun culture guy, and educating, and like, how did you do that? And how do we do that? How do people, how does your audience do that?
Well, I think that if you have been employed for the majority of your life by someone else. There is a large part of creating value that you're ignorant on. So somebody has given you a paycheck, and that's how you've paid for your lifestyle, but that entrepreneur or that business owner has had to go out and get the client, whatever client that may be, if it's a business-to-business relationship, or it's a bunch of consumers, or it's software as a service, or whatever these things that generate revenue for the business. They have to pay overhead for that business. They have to pay insurance. They have to pay HR. They have to pay all these different departments. You know, if you've been in the military, you're in a really large institution that doesn't actually have to provide value to people directly correlated to a dollar amount, because the U.S. government's going to levy taxes against the population. You have to pay that or you get thrown in prison, and the budgets are allocated based on tax revenue and all those kinds of things. But if you work for a business or you've worked in these, you know, you've been employed, you are doing, your time is worth a certain dollar amount. It's very much, you can calculate it. You know exactly what, you know, and then even younger guys, it's, you know, starting out, a chunk of that money gets pulled out for Social Security, for your tax withholdings, because the government wants an interest-free loan from you through the whole year. And then everybody views it as when they get their tax return, they view that as like, oh, I got this paycheck, but it's really just money the government took from you for the whole part of the year. You know, understanding what your time is worth. And it's very easy when you're an employee to do that matrix and understand what, as a military guy, this is what my base pay was. When you actually are out on your own, and that's in my particular school of thought, that's the only way you truly are free and you're independent, is if you own the businesses that pay your bills. And the reason I say that, or you're working for somebody who aligns with your value system perfectly, as perfectly as another man or woman could align with you, and you believe that he or she has your best interest in mind. And what I think a lot of people learned in COVID is that your employer didn't really share your value set as much as you thought they did, and or your coworkers didn't, or your employer wanted to be compliant more than they wanted to advocate for your freedom or your rights. And it all over the spectrum, you know, happened. So when I think this conversation is good to be having at this point, because it's fresh in everybody's mind. There's no doubt a lot of listeners out there that their employment status changed, or their revenue, their household take-home pay changed. And the other side of it is that the government has created a lot of currency digitally, in a sense, since this all kicked off. They've flooded the market, and the U.S. has not been the worst country at all. The U.S. is, compared to other countries, has actually done really well. A good book I just finished was Peter Zahan's "The End of the World Is Just the Beginning." I think the subtitle is the collapse of globalization, and essentially a geopolitical analysis of the entire world with respect to population, money, natural resources, and stuff like that. And so you got to kind of understand macro, you got to understand micro, but ultimately what it comes down to is when you are trying to get someone else to part with their money for a service or a product that you make, it's a lot harder than you expect. I would imagine in your position, as the different things that you sell, like we talked about, you know, the merchandise, the community stuff. When trying to build a community, everybody likes the community when it's free, and you know, people have figured out how to you know, give free services, then sell your data, or whatever the other ways to do it. But actually, how many people will go online, enter their credit card information, and buy something? It's a smaller percentage than will do whatever is for free. So once you actually have to ask somebody to write the check, or to transfer the money, or to process their credit card, that is a small number, or that's harder to do than it is to just be friends with somebody or to hang out.
It's a humbling process to go through and say, what value am I adding? What good am I doing? Right? It's sometimes it can actually. I think I've even encountered my own stuff. Like it's not like it's the best I can say is it's humbling. Like, what am I? It's not that I say I make the best X or Y or I have the best brand or idea or whatever. It's just like, but it's humbling to say what value do I add. And ask that question honestly. So go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think that the way that a middle class American makes their way in the world is they trade their time for a certain amount of money. That's the transaction. I will give you 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year with 2 weeks of vacation paid, and essentially getting paid for 52 weeks, working 50 of those weeks. And this is the dollar amount that I get. The government takes a chunk of that from you, and the government takes a chunk of, then your employer is responsible for half of your payroll or half of your Social Security, Medicaid, all that kinds of stuff. So there's this cost, even just when you're self-employed, realizing that there's a lot of guys in our from our background that went and did 1099 work and thought they were making a ton of money because they were getting stroked this 1099 daily rate. And then the end of the year came, they got a W-9 sent to them from the employer because that employer or that company that contracted you said, I gave this person tax ID this much money. I don't want to pay taxes on that. That's actually money I spent. And then it's notifying the IRS, this guy's responsible to pay 100% of the Social Security, Medicaid, and all the income tax and all this kinds of stuff. And then some guys create an LLC that they're smart and they say, I want the 1099 to get paid to this LLC, not to me personally, and I want to pay for all my job-related expenses. It's actually treated a little bit, even though you're a single-member LLC, and they've figured out how to do the accounting better to where a good chunk of that money gets attributed to work-related expenses, and so there's less to actually pay that on. And even then, you're better off, in my estimation, because you are given 100% control of that money, and if you do it as a business, you get to say, this is what was allotted to. So owning your own business, even my guys that work for me have LLCs, contractors or whatever, and I write a check to their LLC and they get to pay for their trucks and they pay for all this kind of stuff. So essentially reducing what amount is taxable. And when you own your own business, you have control over that. You own you get to allocate the money towards, and the reason why is because if you spent the money on something that enables you to do business better, then it's an incentive on the market as a business to allocate money towards these things that enable you to. So from a really practical level, when I got out of the military, I started a construction company and I bought a truck. The truck is owned by the company. So that $18,000 I spent on the truck comes off of my taxable income because it's the work truck. I still have the truck. Now I keep track of what mileage is for personal, and so I can't deduct those miles, or I have to, you don't get to just wing it and use it all for personal. And it was legitimately a business truck, and I bought tools. And so I think in some ways, people can treat productive property, or they think real estate like, I got to buy a house. Productive property is literally something you own that enables you to make money that, in a sense, exceeds its cost. So if you buy a tool belt and you buy a hammer and you go out and you say, I'm going to build a deck with this tool belt and this hammer, that hammer enables you to do something that you couldn't do with just your bare hands. I have a farm, I have a tractor. That tractor enables me to move things that I couldn't move. That would take me longer to move by hand because I'd have to cut the tree up smaller or whatever. So essentially, you're allocating the resource of money to make yourself able to do more work in a certain amount of time. As a business owner, I pay people to do work for me, and I put a markup on that. I'm managing the people. I have the expertise to move them around. So my education didn't start on really at all on that until I left the military. Now, fortunately, I bought I bought a fixer-upper as my first house, bought it for $175,000, sold it for $277,500. I bought it with a military bonus. So a lot of guys, when they get a windfall of cash, will put it into something that is considered that depreciates in value or becomes valued less over time. So the key is to allocate your time towards things that make you the most money, and allocate your marginal discretionary income, stuff that is above and beyond what you're required to live, towards something that makes you either A, be able to do something with your time like a tool, that you can now, I'm driving a skid steer. I can grade land now. I can charge $150, $200 an hour. I'm on the machine, whatever. Or you can go get an education. And that's essentially what the college scam where I sit, by and large, is. Take all this college debt, go on this wizard, sign up for these classes, get the loan. It's I just did a podcast with Dr. Merkel, who's the president of New St. Andrews College, which is one of the only colleges in the country that takes zero federal funding. And what that enables them to do is to have all the colleges have a compliance department to make sure that they're Title IX compliant, that they spend the same amount of money on, women and men's things. And there's all these things that they can prove to the government that their institution is compliant, so that they can get this student loan and this Pell Grant money. So they remove kind of it's the only loan that you can get that when you have to prove you can't pay it back to get it. Everything else, to get the loan, you got to prove you can pay it.
This is your college loan? Yeah.
The college loan is the only loan that you get. You say, look, I can't pay for it. Okay, great.
Wild, yeah. It's wild to think that you're saddling somebody who doesn't know how they're going to make money in 5 years or 5 weeks with $100,000 in debt. It's odd to think about it, but we're not the first people to address this problem.
No, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that what the college is saying to you is, take out this loan, take these classes. At the end of these classes, and with this piece of paper, your rate at which you sell your time is going to be a higher rate. And that will enable you in 4 years, in 6 years, in, whatever it takes, when you get your doctorate, whatever you stay. At that point, you will be a higher wage earner, and you can pay that. The loan will feel like nothing, because at least you're not making $29,000 a year and barely making it by. You're a white collar job. You're making $110,000 a year. You're making $150. You're making $250, whatever. And that is true for a lot of people, that they do get a higher earning thing. But in my where I sit, and what I've learned the last 6 years in small business, is that doing things and actually starting to try to get people to give you their money right away in a free market exchange, without coercion, with providing value to people, and having control over that process. It hurts at first, because the market feedback for me was my time was worth about $3 an hour when I first started, and mostly that was because I was charging the client $50 an hour for my time, and $20 an hour for a guy that I paid $15 an hour. And I thought, I'm doing great. I'm making $5 an hour on a guy, and I'm not working. He's working $5 an hour, and I'm making $50 an hour. So I'm really making $55 an hour, forgetting that I'm having to put gas in the truck, that I'm having to pay liability insurance, that I'm having to, and I own the truck cash, I own the tools cash, I owned everything. So my overhead was almost nothing. But I still had overhead. And when you're paying a liability insurance premium, and you're paying, I got to pay an accountant at the end of the year. And then, what that equaled for me was $44,000 in the red my first year of business, with 5 kids, 2 mortgages, and having to pay back the military almost 40 grand of my bonus that I didn't finish earning, as a 5-year bonus that I only served 2.5 of. So that is essentially economically my lowest point, and realizing why I just worked an entire month, and I don't know how to pay everything at the end of this month.
Yep.
I got $6,000 in my corporate checking account. I owe subcontractors $8,000, and we haven't even paid my mortgages yet. I'm renting. I have a duplex in a historic mansion I'm fixing up, so the duplex mortgage is covered. I'm making about $400 from that, but my mortgage over here is almost $2,000. Like, that is a painful experience, but you have to figure out, okay, what do I charge to actually at the end of the month make something? And then I also have to convince clients to pay that, and I have to be providing a service to them. So I guess for me, and it's not for everybody, but for me, if you can suck it up and you can take the risk and you can figure out, do a skills assessment of yourself. What do I know how to do? Where I sit, that especially, and I've done a podcast with Rob Sense on this, who did a bunch of professional polling and marketplace data analysis. What he claims is we are at a demographic cliff where the boomers exiting, have essentially almost completely exited the market, the World War II, kids, and there is not enough people to do the work that is required to keep our society going. And that's why when you go to these fast food restaurants, you're getting the most miserable service you've ever gotten. You thought it couldn't get worse than 2019 fast food service, or you're going to your favorite place and there's a sign, we're only open 3 days a week because we don't have enough people. And that is the demographic cliff that Rob Sense talks about, that Peter Zahon talks about in his books, that is essentially a entire generation that didn't have children and didn't have a lot of kids, which is fine.
Oh. So you think it's okay? So they're saying it's generation based, as in like the people who would work those jobs don't exist anymore. We didn't have children, so they're not.
Yes,
there's no children. Okay, so yeah.
So,
okay.
So for somebody who is of working age right now, the opportunities are endless. And the problems that need to be solved by human bodies are more than they've ever been in recent history due to the size of the workforce. And for me, as somebody who has, and what I guess the paradigm shift and we talked about, so there's productive property. And then I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned on this, but creating a productive household. So that is the sum of you and your wife and your children. And essentially you're saying, future children, a multi-generational approach to things. And this is not to disparage people that haven't had children, or to say if you're single or whatever. Essentially it's just to say you're alive right now, you're able to work. It's a good time to be alive if you're willing to work and figure out how to work smarter, or how to work harder, or both. Work hard and smart. And I guess the other side of it is, I don't know that I said this. There's 168 hours in a week. You can work 50 hours, sleep 8 hours a night, take 24 hours off for the entire Sunday Sabbath rest, as is my tradition to do, and take 2 hours a day for hygiene and working out, eating, etc. So 50 hours a week, 8 hours a night, sleeping 24 hours off on Sunday, an entire, day, and you still have 32 hours left in a week. So most people, I would imagine, listening to this maybe would say that they work 50 hours a week, but unless you own your own business, or you're working for, a slave driving management consulting firm that's trying to build maximum hours on you and all this kind of stuff, majority of Americans work on average between 32 and 38 hours a week, I think is what the average is. So if you transfer that over, it's like now you have over 40 hours a week free time. Most people don't sleep 8 hours. Most people don't take Sunday off. So what you have to do is figure out, and what I did and I do regularly is you just take a piece of paper out and you use a line for each half hour, and for an entire week, log your time and see where it goes. And you don't even have to log your time so much as even swipe left or swipe right and look at your screen time notification if you're an iPhone user, and see how much time you spent looking at your phone. And that's a pretty good indication of, for most people, where they have some discretionary time that they can use. And you have to start, if you want to create margin for yourself, or it was often referred to as personal runway, you have to convert what you are using in an unprofitable way right now to a more profitable way. So you get, and in the ways that you can do that, if you're working a job, you excel at that job, you show the employer by your performance that you deserve more responsibility. And we talked about this before, point-to-point conversation. You get another job offer, it's a better way to say, hey, somebody else is willing to pay me X. I don't really want to jump ship. I like you. I want to stay here, but I need to get this much, or whatever. And to say, and especially in a market where an employer is if you're doing good by your employer, they want to keep you. It's cheaper for them to give you a little bit of a raise and keep you, or you get another job somewhere else, or you go out on your own. And my advice from where I sit, this is not for everybody, is take that 32 hours a week and put it towards a business that you want to grow into the full-time business. Keep getting your discretionary stuff, all your living expenses taken care of by your current job, remove that kind of stress, build a skill, do a online business, figure out these. And even if it's not the one you end up staying in, you're essentially ruling out and creating learning happening that you're responsible for, and be a student of that. And say, oh man, I hated doing that. That was terrible. And also be aware of, I say all the time, there's no such thing as easy money. If somebody's saying, make this much money, no risk, bullcrap. You make money by taking a risk. So they're saying no risks because they want you to give them your money to them. And it's no risk for them once you give them your money. But so there's all these schemes. Essentially, if it's you got to be able to tolerate more pain, work longer hours, work more efficient, work smarter. And there's, limitless ways to do that in this market. And that's what I focus on with my boys, my daughters and stuff. They have farm-based businesses that they're running. They're having to manage cash, small amounts, but they're understanding, oh, wow, these chickens, I get $5 a dozen, farm fresh eggs. I sell out every week, but I am responsible for buying food, and this food's $22 and this a bag, and this is how long it lasts, and, whatever. Oh, shoot, egg cartons, I'm running out. We got to order them. They're 60 cents. I got to buy 200 egg cartons to get that 60-cent rate over $1 a carton rate. So, I'm out that cash up front to get those egg cartons, and work through these very basic cash flow, and delivering a service, making sure that when they transport the eggs to church, they don't drop them and crack them because they're out that money, and all these things that my 10-year-old's learning right now. And but also it's kind of pretty cool because he's making $30 a week, we also don't let him keep all of his inventory because they're staying in my coops on my land and all that kind of stuff. So mom gets to use some of the eggs for the family, or we get to, give, and even teach them to give them away. Hey, you didn't sell all 6 dozen today. Why don't you give half a dozen to somebody who is helping you, and build relationship that way? And I think that just by and large, our kids and we, even me being homeschooled and grown, I learned a lot of this via osmosis being around my dad being an entrepreneur. So I got the entrepreneur gene, if you will. I remember when my dad said, hey, we're cutting back discretionary spending because dad's starting his own business. It was 1989, and he still runs that business today. And I think my tendency even still is I got to do another business. I got to pivot. This sucks. This client's being a pain. This is really hard to manage this. And I would be way farther along if I didn't try 5 or 6 other ventures since getting out of the military, or side hustles or things like that, because the reality is work sucks. And Ecclesiastes talks about it, rejoice in your toil. And so that is my mantra. If you can rejoice in toil, because the reality is work is toil, it sucks. If you can do that, if you can say, I am doing this for a purpose, I am trading this time for this amount of money, I know what's happening, I know what the value exchange is here, I'm going to take 10% of that, 20% of that, and put it away so that in 1 year, what I'm doing in those discretionary 32 hours can become something that I do for 60 hours a week, and I get 20 hours into my schedule because I've been given 40 to somebody else now. And you can understand what is happening there, and you can be disciplined with your time. That's essentially where it starts, is discipline with your time. And when you start to realize how much it takes, how much energy it takes to get that amount of money, and you view every purchase through, if you're working $50 an hour and you go fill up, I go fill up my Suburban or my F-250 right now with diesel, and it's $106 or whatever. It's like at my previous hourly rate, that was 2.5 hours of my life, and to fill this truck up right now. And so people, one of the books that I think is foundational for this paradigm shift for me was The Millionaire Next Door, and realizing that the vast majority of financially independent or people that have margin in their life are, small town business owners, guys that have stayed in the town they grew up in, or have stayed in their specific location for a long time, are married, have a couple kids. Those kids don't need them for money. They don't provide what the book calls outpatient financial care to grown children. And those kids are out there and industrious. And so viewing children as able to be, the podcast that I just released with John Moody, he says that he believes in their household, when the kid is 8 years old, they should be a net positive as far as value creation for the family versus what they consume. And when you're on a farm and you're moving pigs and cows and you're doing these things and you're selling them and butchering them, it's a family business, and you can tell your 13-year-old, go take care of this chore, and your workforce is in-house, the value creation is limitless, essentially. And that's why I like post-military life more than I ever liked the military, sincerely, because literally the only limit is my imagination and my ability to execute. And when you are employed, when you're working for someone else, you're always limited by that culture and that ability to operate in that culture. And even at the pinnacle, I felt limited by my ability to operate in the culture. There was still approvals. There was still political intersection of political things. There was geographic stuff. There was cultural. And now that I'm a business owner, I get to have a conversation with my wife because I trust her, and then I get to execute that day. And there's nobody telling me how to spend my time. But at the same time, I spend my time here talking to you on the microphone. It's opportunity cost lost somewhere else. That is when you really start to understand the opportunity cost of your time, what it takes to actually get it done. And then you also create margin to be able to do things like this, to be able to do things that are not necessarily a monetary benefit in the forefront, but have network effects and have lasting effects. And how the awesome thing that there could be a young man out there listening to this right now and think, shoot, maybe I shouldn't do college. Maybe I should go do an internship with a guy that's building houses in my neighborhood and realize that I could be making six figures at 20 years old and not have any debt and those are the projects that I'm pushing my energy into, is giving people tools to create personal freedom through financial margin.
Do you think? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm waiting on you.
Well, because the concepts around a productive household, the concepts around employing your time in a profitable way are mind blowing. What you can do with that, and when you realize that there's a lot of people that won't take that risk, and you can paint a vision for them. Come work for me, and in 2 years you will be this. I promise you, you're going to get paid the whole time. And then if you want to start a business, I'm going to help you do it. I've been doing it for 6 years. Come work with me. And that's why I literally have a guy coming out of the military. He has 6 children, or his 6th child is on the way. He's been in the Army 8 years. And I can look this guy in the eye and I can say, I will get you 5 years down the road in business in a year, because I'm going to just give it to you and you're going to work with me. And then the reality is we're believing that this is going to be exponentially beneficial. This is going to be something that my business gets better because you like doing tasks. I've done personality tests. You like doing things that I despise doing. So this is going to work out well. You're going to do things that I literally haven't ever done that I should have done because I hated it so bad. And then you're going to get, that won't work. I'm telling you, you get to go to watch me sell a job to a client, and then we debrief it afterwards. And we go to 3 different clients in one day, and I tell you, this is how I'm reading all 3 of these people. This is the person we don't want to work for of these 3. This is the one we want to work for of the 3. And I can tell that now because I've been selling for 6 years in the construction industry. And I know this person's a tire kicker, or I'm not even going to go to this job unless they pay me an initial fee or whatever. And all these things that you don't get to do when you first start out. When you first start out, you go to every single job and you burn your gas to get there. And most of them don't hire because you have to learn this person's not going to buy anything, or that person didn't. Oh, that was the same, and you start to pick up on the trends, and then you realize, oh, okay, here's a link, schedule a consult. It'll take payment right there. And if you don't do it, I don't care, because there's 17 people in line after you, and we're good, because you develop a brand, you develop a reputation, and it's just really cool to see that happen and to know that you did it with a firm reliance on Almighty God. Just like the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We are declaring this, and we don't know what's happening next. And it's for a young man or young men in our society, like we talked about at the beginning of this, laying down at night and knowing that you did something worthwhile and that somebody was willing to voluntarily give your money to you, trust you with it, and that you could execute on that service. You get to sleep well at night knowing that, and to be around your kids and to take them with you on the job. And so I guess one of the things I'd like to say too is, we talked about those 5 friends or who they are. One of the things I think that can really hurt for somebody when you listen, it's very likely some of y'all are out there, you're listening to this podcast, you're gonna something in your mindset flipped when you listen to what we just talked about. And you're going to go and you're going to say that to your 3 or 4 friends that you hang out with on Saturday night drinking beers. And you're going to be like, dude, I heard this thing. And it's literally going to go right over their head. And they're not going to care. And the reality is they'll be right there drinking beers every Saturday night talking about how, they hate their boss. And you might be the only one that went and did something based on what I said. And they're also going to hate you for it too, because they're going to say, this guy, too good for me, too good for us. What the heck? And they're literally, I think C.S. Lewis said, he who is going nowhere can have no fellow travelers. And I think that's a lot of people actually are going nowhere and have a lot of fellow travelers, in a sense that, if you're going somewhere, the people that are going nowhere with you are not your fellow travelers. And that's in my own family, in my own siblings, in my own church. There are relationships that I don't have anymore, or are at a different status, because I went and did something and they didn't. And every time we hang out, I am proof to them that they were scared, and we're thriving. And I guess I also have to say, I did not do this by myself. You can do everything I say. You can go take the risk. And the reality is you could just be dirt poor your whole life and fail at everything. But I would say that even in business, the reality that even now, having lived on a bus for 6 months, 400 square feet under roof, and, walkable square feet, 120 square feet or so, with 5 kids and a wife, you don't need a lot to have an amazing life. Yeah. And we have a lot of outdoor space, but even then, like, you can, the experience of life and the human flourishing has nothing to do with total money in the bank, but has everything to do with feeling effective, meaningful work, and relationships that are, are affirming what the Creator has put into you. So if you're trying to be better and you're trying to do these things and you're seeking out this guidance and you're trying to, and people are telling you that's dumb and talking down on you, it's because they don't want you to rise up and excel, and they want to keep you right where you're at, because right where you're at, they're comfortable with. That's who you are. Ian McLeod has a great book called Ignore Everybody. He's a design, guy, artistic guy, and people are just comfortable with you the way you are. And when you change, they're not comfortable with change. They're comfortable with the same version of you. And so just being ready and just being like, when it happens, it's not, you don't have to jerk to them about it. You're just like, okay, I am getting better and you don't like me. That's not my problem.
Do you think that people have the ability to control how much they value time? We hear it a lot. We hear oh, well, maybe you quit your job because they're not valuing your time enough. Like, do you think an individual has the ability to adjust how much they value their own time? Or is it something that has to happen to them?
I think that that first of all, with the discretionary time outside of your employment, you can decide immediately that you value that time more than you did before you did, and say, I value my time. I have set this goal of, in 1 year from now, quitting my primary job and going full time on this thing that I want to start. To do that, that means I want to build, one hydroponic, grow your own tomatoes in your backyard kind of thing. It's a high scale thing or whatever. I talked to a guy that's doing that from a landscape design perspective, some high end, raised beds and things like that. Just it can be anything. The trades based thing is pretty fantastic, because you're taking raw goods and forming them into a product or a service. And in some ways, you have a little bit more control over that process, and you own it. One of the reasons why I moved into farming, Rory Groves, the author of Durable Trades, talks about the vocational sector being broken down into 4 markets or 4 sectors. And the primary sector is taking stuff straight from the land: quarries, fisheries, farming, milling, lumber, things like that, or forestry, cutting down trees. And then, secondary industry, taking raw goods and forming something. And so from those raw goods, and those 2 sectors used to make up about 70% of the U.S. market. Now it's about 2 to 3%, I think, if I am correct. Our society is extremely top heavy on research, education, and professional services, and there's very little. And so my particular focus has been as close to the ground as possible, taking 2x4s, making walls with them, taking little chickens. We picked up 35 chickens today at the post office, and feeding them, growing them into where they're laying eggs, turning them into a bird that's worth $30, of clean food, these kind of things that once you get the bird and once you acquire the feed for them, or you have fields that they can graze on, like, you control the process from there, and you're not dependent on other things. So I don't know. That's a verbose as it gets definition, but hopefully also practical.
Yeah, I can see you. Sometimes you can see the system out a ways, but you can't see how to get there. And sometimes, I think, I have done that before in the past, where I've taken my time and I've documented every 15 minutes or every half hour what that time is spent on, and then you have the phrase, what it gets measured gets managed, and and the first step is the hardest step, and the world is sometimes I have to ask the question. It's like, the world is in no way, shape, or form short of good advice. It's short on the willingness to see it through. Like, it's a hard answer. It's a shortness to in order to produce anything, you must act. We'll go straight to philosophy. In order to, you look at gun culture a lot, and it's undergoing a shift in its ways of evaluating things, and it's not only about what you have, it's what you're doing or what you can do, and sometimes it's who you know, and sometimes it's all these messy things. But at the end of the day, we know that the person who does the thing is higher on the hierarchy than the person who has the thing, in theory. And then action requires, in order to get something, you must act. There is no such thing as a free lunch, which is well, that's terrifying. Well, that's not terrifying. I'm sorry. It's an encouraging and thing, because then there is also the idea that if you do act, you will get the thing. And I think that's where the cynicism of our era dominates, is that we believe that the rule of cause and we live as if we believe that the rules of cause and effect have broken down, that with post-enlightenment, postmodernist philosophers and whatever, that we have believed that the world has essentially lost its soul, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it. And the result is that we have, my goodness, this thing is losing its mind. I'm going to have to, add new. Oh, another one. Great. Cool. But we have this great cynicism towards the world, as if it's not a world of cause and effect, that we haven't, my work, I'm not valued for my time. Whatever I put my work into doesn't produce. It'll never produce anything. Self-doubt, or the communists. You can always blame the communists. It's like that's probably the greatest moral failing of communism as a belief system, is that it ingrains within the world a breach of cause and effect, that if you work and you provide, you get paid according to what you need. And since you get paid according to what you need, not what you produce, then that means somewhere in the ecosystem, the system is broken. But that's a hard
and I think we can do that on a personal level. We can say, I paid my mortgage, or I got next month's mortgage in the bank. I know what my living expenses are. I got a month. All right, even Dave Ramsey, I got 3 to 6 months emergency fund in the bank. I'm good. And so I don't have to work now. Even if I get fired tomorrow, I'll be fine for 3 to 6 months, and I'll figure it out. And even at a fundamental human level, I have to do that. I have to say, even though I know my rental properties are bringing in X, my construction business is bringing in X, I got this many pending, and it's not, if it's not in the bank, it's not certain. Even if it's in the bank, something could come up that could envelop that. And in some ways, where I'm sitting is, I've seen what I felt like was impossible, and I pulled the month off. I mean, I've literally written my IRS check, in April, and sent it being thousands of dollars short in the account that I wrote the check out. But I knew the check's got to go to Louisiana. And so I got 3 to 5 days to not be penalized for sending this money late because it's postmarked on the 15th, and go out and collect on invoices because I've done the work and I just have to get the, but then I don't know the client's going to write the check on time, or I don't know this. And to just say, shoot, worst thing that happens is a check bounces, it's $25 fee. I pay some late fees, and to go for it. And so when you go for it and it works out and you're like, okay, I was fine. Everybody, and then the reality of being in America, there's nobody living in the dumps. Like I saw whole families and whole, social groups in North Africa. You are the richest, by percentage, by far, if you're an American citizen. It's, the lottery, the geographic lottery, and to, in some ways, be like, I can go for it. And this is, of all the places on earth, regardless of what's going on, still the place that people want to go for it in. And so go for it. And a lot of our generation and younger will say, I am not valued for my time. I can't remember the name of the comedian that talks about, he has a bit where he talks about, he's like, oh, for sure, just have a bad attitude about that job, and I'll automatically realize that I need to promote you because you had a bad attitude, and obviously you're smarter than this job, and so I need to promote you. That's the solution. No, you're getting paid $8 an hour, $9 an hour, $10 an hour. You think you'd be worth 50? Legitimately give your employer $50 an hour worth of work and see what happens. See if you don't get a raise, and see if you don't, or stick it to your boss and go make $58 an hour next week. If you're really that awesome and he really doesn't see it, then go make it on your own if you really are. Because that's, I guess, in the reality of when I left the military and I was making as much as any enlisted guy makes with all the pro pays and special duty things and all that stuff, and then to be remodeling an old lady's bathroom at a net loss. I mean, my time was worth nothing, or it was worth more, and I needed to figure it out. But the reality was, the free market was telling me, at 14 years of special operations military service with 5 kids and 2 mortgages, no pension, your time is worth $3 an hour. And to say, shoot, I don't think I'm worth $3 an hour. Why? Oh, it must be my mistake. It's not other people's fault. It's not, like, literally, that's what my time was worth. I was arranging the circumstances such that I got paid $3 an hour. But I don't want to be making $3 an hour, so what do I need to do? Do I need to work faster? Do I need to get another guy that's cheaper? Do I need to charge the client more? Or do I need to do all 3? Yes, I need to do all 3. Okay, let's do this. And then seeing that slow into the right, slow into the right, up into the right curve. And with podcasting, it's the same way, to say, man, 12 people downloaded, the first episode of my podcast in the first week and a half, or whatever, like starting from 0. Why did I think podcasting was going to equal 6 months to Joe Rogan? Nope. Never happened. Never happens.
Yeah.
And so realize is like, and Ryan Mickler has this post. I just posted it on one of my stories. It's like, how'd you get this guest? Easy. 750 episodes straight. Never missed a week. Then I asked him, can you do something for every week for 750 weeks, or 750 episodes. And then you probably will have a pretty good podcast because you stuck with it and you did well. And business is no different. Relationships are no different. I think that the way that the Lord knit together the universe is that it's just from top to bottom consistent. And it is, and seeing that consistency and then not liking it because what it means for you, the bottom line is you're lazy. That kind of sucks. But then you say, okay, I'm lazy. How do I work better? Okay, I work better. I got more money. Oh, okay. Or I have more free time, or I did this. And seeing that cause and effect and being part of the effect in that is huge, and is when you get really excited about life, and where I'm at. I mean, my business, like I think we talked about at the beginning, my business has a ton of room to improve, and I can easily say, oh, my business is good, I don't need to improve. We're making this much money, whatever. Or I can say, what is this business capable of if I really buckle down and I figure out, I have this meeting with my accountant and my assistant, and we talk about how to get receipts filed more efficiently so that I have a more accurate representation of where my job cash flow is, and I understand my pricing model. So the 3 estimates that I'm doing this week are more accurate based on current market conditions. Boom, this is going to be awesome. But it requires a Zoom call with my accountant and assistant, and coming up with a system and talking about how do we scan receipts in, and how do we label them appropriately, and how do we do all these things, and driving that and realizing it's not going to happen unless you send the email and you assemble the team and you lay the standard out and you give a checklist and you execute it. And then when you do, it works. Wow. I made up a procedure. I trained somebody on it. And it does it, or they don't do it well. I need to fire them. And it's just an unlimited playground of cause and effect learning that equals more time or more money when you do it well, or both, I mean, really. And that's when you're truly free to see that happen and make it happen in your own life. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, then let's close on that. Let's end on that, because I think at this point in time, I'm approaching I see the advice that you've given me, the advice that I'm going to go write my schedule and do the same thing, right? Like, I know I'm going to go look and go, okay, where's my time being lost? Where's my time being wasted right now? And that's a good, you've done your job. I'm leaving. So where can people find you? You said you've got your own podcast, you've got your own content. And where do people get a hold of you? Where do they find you? And then if they want to even pay you to fix their house, where do you exist in this digital universe?
My website, spearing.co, spearing.co, and that has all the social handles in the header that I am active on. There's messaging functions on pretty much all of those to get in touch with me or my people. Podcast is underneath one of the tabs there. The podcast is Life on Target on all the major podcast platforms. Search Nathan Spearing. You can see some of I'm probably at 10 to 15 podcasts at this point, appearances on other people's shows. Talk about versions of this or more detail on different things. And let me know. Shoot me a message, ask specific questions. I love the reality that a little piece of information can change the trajectory, the azimuth that can, going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. If I can get you 2 to 3 degrees more accurate on the bearing, the azimuth that you're walking in life, and it equals you being, in 2 to 3 years, miles closer to the target than you would have been without that. That's a pretty exciting thing for me. So put out regularly on all the different social channels, weekly podcast, and let me know how I can help with the movement that you got going on. I'm in the middle of writing the Productive Property Field Manual, which is the Productive Household Field Manual, because I think that it's just to go through. Okay, I got a loan. I did this. This is how I started the company. This is the steps I took. This is the, just not as the way, but as this is the 15-year, 16-year path that I walked. And these are the things that I did. And this is why I am where I am. And this is where I'm going with it. And this is what you can do too. This is not something that, one of the things reason I ascended so far in the military is because when other people said, I don't really need this, I said, fine, but I'm going to go until I can't go anymore. And I'm not going to stop, and I'm not going to quit, and I'm not going to. And so that mental toughness and tenacity, when things don't go your way, to keep going. That's what I do in business now too, is being willing to do something somebody else isn't willing to do, that because it sucks more. I don't want to be in that attic. I don't want to be in that crawl space. I don't want to take, this is difficult. If it's difficult, if it's hard, it's making a bunch of people quit, and there's opportunity for you. So knock it out.
Yep. I mean, if you want to start a fast food chain, maybe now's the time to do it.
Well, if this podcast has added value to your life, I'm again stealing other people's words because all art is theft. If this podcast has added something to your life, you can support the channel through our merch at redactedllc.com. Thank you for listening. And Nathan, thank you for, again, struggling through the first stages of figuring this out, and how do we run a show, and how do we get everything working out. But thank you for being, in some sense, a wise advice in the background when I'm willing to actually listen to you. So, let's do this again sometime. Let's have another conversation in the future. And thank you again for coming on. So,
absolutely,
take care.
My pleasure. Bye.